The set of The View was filled with excitement and anticipation as legendary filmmaker and comedian Mel Brooks took his seat for a highly anticipated interview. Known for his quick wit and sharp humor, Mel had long been a beloved figure in Hollywood, but what viewers didn't expect was the eruption that would soon follow. It all started when Behar, one of the show's outspoken co-hosts, made a comment that seemed to set Brooks off in a way no one had ever seen before. Every the provocateur, began the conversation by asking Mel about his early career in Hollywood and the evolution of his comedy. Brooks, ever charming, answered with his signature humor, recalling funny anecdotes from his legendary films. But as the interview progressed, the questions began to shift, and it became clear that the co-hosts were steering the conversation toward more controversial topics, specifically Mel's political views and past remarks about Hollywood culture. It was a question from Behar that started the tension. "Mel," Joy asked, "you've always been a bit of a maverick in the industry, someone who's never been afraid to speak your mind. But in today's climate, do you think comedy still has the same power it once did?" The question, seemingly innocent on the surface, touched a nerve in Brooks, who had always been unapologetic in his approach to satire and political humor. The room instantly seemed to cool as Mel's mood began to shift. Brooks paused for a moment, as if collecting his thoughts, before responding with a pointed tone. "You know, Joy, comedy is never about being safe. It's always about pushing boundaries. But right now, everyone's so afraid of offending someone, they're losing their sense of humor." His words were laced with frustration, and it was clear that he wasn't just talking about the current climate of comedy but also the broader pressures facing the entertainment industry. Behar, though, was quick to counter, and this sparked the beginning of a tense exchange. "But Mel, you've made a career out of pushing boundaries, and now it seems like everyone has to be so careful," Joy interjected, her voice rising in challenge. "Isn't that a bit of a contradiction? You push the envelope in your films, but now you're saying people should relax." Brooks leaned forward, his famous blue eyes narrowing as he locked eyes with Behar. "No, Joy, it's not about relaxing. It's about respecting the audience and understanding that humor can be a weapon. It can change minds, make people think, and yes, make them uncomfortable." The other co-hosts on The View seemed to exchange nervous glances, unsure of how to navigate the growing tension between the two. While Behar wasn't known for shying away from confrontation, she had never faced a guest like Mel Brooks. His reputation for speaking his mind was legendary, but today, it seemed he wasn't in the mood to play nice. As the conversation continued, the atmosphere became even more charged, and the viewers at home could sense the brewing storm. Joy, not one to back down from a debate, continued to press. "But don't you think there's a line? I mean, in this era of cancel culture, comedians and actors are being criticized for everything. Can you really blame people for being careful?" Mel's jaw tightened as he leaned in, clearly growing frustrated. "Cancel culture? It's the death of humor," he said sharply. "If we're all too scared to say anything, then what are we doing? Comedy should be about making people think, not about what's safe for the public to consume." By now, the exchange had become more heated. The other hosts tried to redirect the conversation, but it was clear that the tension between Brooks and Behar was escalating. "What you're missing, Mel, is that comedy has always been about challenging norms, but right now, it's about responsibility," Joy countered, her tone firm. Brooks shook his head. "Responsibility? Responsibility to whom?" "The people who are offended by a joke. We're in danger of losing the essence of what comedy is all about." At this point, Mel's frustration was palpable. "I've spent my entire career pushing boundaries. From Blazing Saddles to The Producers, I've made people laugh by exposing the absurdities of society," he continued, his voice growing louder. "But if we can't laugh at ourselves anymore, what kind of world are we living in? A world where everything is so politically correct that we can't even joke about anything anymore?" Joy's response was immediate and blunt. "Maybe it's time to evolve, Mel. Not everything should be fair game." The words hung in the air like a charged electric current. The audience was on the edge of their seats, unsure of what would happen next. Mel Brooks, a man who had been known for his infectious humor and quick wit, was now visibly irritated, his patience wearing thin. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, before delivering a pointed response that would reverberate across the set. Evolve? Evolve? Maybe we should stop evolving and start remembering what made comedy great in the first place. Mel's voice was now almost a shout, his face flushed with anger. I'm not here to make everyone feel good about themselves. I'm here to make them laugh, make them think, and yes, sometimes make them uncomfortable. But that's the power of comedy. It challenges the status quo. The tension on The View was at its peak, and it seemed like this debate wasn't going to end anytime soon. Joy, equally fired up, was not ready to back down either. I get it, Mel, but you're acting like this is a personal attack, she shot back. Nobody's saying you can't be funny, but don't you think the world has changed? The jokes that were funny 20 years ago may not be funny anymore, and that's okay. Times change. Mel's frustration boiled over as he stood up abruptly, shaking his head. I'm not asking for permission to be funny, Joy. I'm not asking for approval. The entire set fell into a tense silence as Brooks's outburst left everyone in shock. The crew members, usually used to the banter of The View, were now unsure of how to proceed. The other co-hosts looked on, with some unsure of how to address the rapidly escalating confrontation. It was rare for the iconic Mel Brooks to lose his temper in such a public manner, but today, it was clear that something had pushed him to his breaking point. The debate, now spiraling out of control, reached its peak as Mel Brooks, his emotions raw, took a step toward the exit. I came here to talk about my work, my legacy, not to be lectured on what I should or shouldn't say, he said, his voice thick with anger. Joy, visibly taken aback, attempted to apologize, but it was too late. Mel, his face red with emotion, shook his head and began walking off the set. As Brooks made his way off stage, the atmosphere on set was tense and uncomfortable. The camera zoomed in on Joy Behar, who was left stunned by the sudden turn of events. The audience at home, unsure of what had just transpired, was left wondering if they had just witnessed a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Had Mel Brooks truly walked off The View? The answer was yes, and the fallout from this shocking confrontation would soon make headlines. The producers scrambled to regain control of the situation. Joy Behar, still in disbelief, turned to the remaining hosts to fill the uncomfortable silence. Well, that certainly wasn't expected, she said dryly, trying to lighten the mood. But it was clear that the confrontation with Mel Brooks had left an indelible mark on the show. The rest of the co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to navigate the fallout from such a public and heated clash. The news of the confrontation spread like wildfire. Media outlets began covering the shocking moment, with headlines proclaiming that Mel Brooks had erupted on The View after a heated clash with Joy Behar. The story quickly gained traction, and the viral clip of Brooks walking off set became a talking point across social media. Fans and critics alike began debating the merits of the argument, with many siding with Brooks and his frustration with the current climate of comedy. Social media exploded with reactions, with some praising Mel Brooks for standing his ground and others criticizing him for his outburst. Mel is right. Comedy should never be about playing it safe, one tweet read. But Joy had a point too. Comedy has to evolve with the times, another user responded. The divided opinion was clear, but the one thing everyone could agree on was that this confrontation would go down as one of the most memorable moments in The View history. Backstage, Mel Brooks was reportedly calm and reflective, though still upset by the way things had gone. In a brief statement issued to the press, Brooks explained that he had nothing personal against Joy Behar but was simply frustrated with the current state of comedy. I've spent my life making people laugh by pushing boundaries, but now it seems like the world is too afraid to laugh, he said. I don't regret anything I said today. Joy Behar, on the other hand, expressed regret over how the interview had spiraled out of control. In a follow-up interview, she acknowledged that she may have pushed Mel too hard, but she stood by her belief that comedy should be held accountable. I respect Mel, but we live in a different world now, she said. Comedy should always evolve with the times, and sometimes, that means having tough conversations. As the dust settled, It was clear that this incident would not be forgotten anytime soon. The viral nature of the confrontation ensured that both Mel Brooks and Joy Behar would be discussing it for weeks to come. Whether it was a sign of the changing dynamics of comedy or just a case of two strong personalities clashing, one thing was certain: the moment had captivated the public's attention. For Brooks, the walk-off was more than just a dramatic exit. It was a statement that comedy, in its purest form, should never be watered down or censored. But for Behar, the incident was a reminder that even in the world of comedy, sensitivity to the changing cultural landscape was important. Both sides had valid points, but neither had been willing to back down. As the weeks passed, the debate continued to rage on social media and in the media. Some saw it as a fight between the old guard and the new, a clash between Mel's unapologetic comedy and Joy's belief that humor should evolve with the times. Others felt that both had valid points, but the delivery had been all wrong. In the end, it was the viewers who were left to decide who, if anyone, had won the argument. The incident led to a broader conversation about the role of humor in today's society. Many began questioning whether the boundaries of comedy had shifted too far, with some arguing that the need to be politically correct had stifled creativity. Others countered that comedy had always been a reflection of societal norms, and as those norms changed, so too should comedy. In the aftermath, The View experienced an uptick in viewers, with people eager to tune in and see the fallout from the Mel Brooks interview. The network, recognizing the magnitude of the moment, announced that they would be addressing the issue in future episodes, with other celebrities chiming in to offer their perspectives on the growing tension between comedy and political correctness. As the world watched, Mel Brooks and Joy Behar became symbols of a larger debate, one that pitted artistic freedom against social responsibility. It was a debate that had been brewing for years but had never been more relevant than it was at that moment. And while neither side emerged as the definitive winner, both Mel and Joy had made their voices heard loud and clear. Mel's walk-off was seen by many as a bold stand for freedom of speech and creative expression. In an age where political correctness was often at the forefront of discussions, Brooks was a voice reminding everyone that humor was a powerful tool to provoke thought and challenge conventions. His exit from The View became a rallying cry for those who believed comedy should be free from censorship. Joy Behar, on the other hand, emerged as a champion for accountability in comedy. In her eyes, humor should always serve a purpose, and comedians had a responsibility to acknowledge the evolving norms of society. While some disagreed with her approach, there was no denying that her passionate defense of comedy's place in today's world resonated with many. As Mel Brooks returned to his projects, it was clear that the controversy would follow him. Whether it was through public appearances, interviews, or social media, The View walk-off remained a central topic of conversation for the foreseeable future. In the years to come, people would look back on this moment as a pivotal event that sparked a larger conversation about the future of comedy. Ultimately, the walk-off was more than just an argument on live television. It was a symbol of the cultural divide over the role of comedy in a rapidly changing world. As both Mel Brooks and Joy Behar continued their careers, they carried with them the weight of their unforgettable confrontation, each continuing to shape the conversation in their own way. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, the confrontation between Mel Brooks and Joy Behar continued to echo across the entertainment world. Comedy clubs, podcasts, and late-night shows referenced the moment as an example of how deeply divided opinions had become. For many veteran comedians, Brooks' eruption felt like a warning that an entire generation of humorists felt unheard and cornered in an industry they helped build. Younger comedians, however, viewed the incident through a different lens. Some argued that Mel's frustration represented resistance to change rather than a defense of art. They believed comedy could still be bold and provocative without alienating audiences. This generational split made the View moment more than viral drama. It became a cultural checkpoint where old-school comedy collided head-on with modern sensibilities. Media analysts began breaking down the exchange frame by frame, pointing out how quickly a respectful interview turned into a heated debate. They noted Joy's persistence on Mel's growing agitation, suggesting the clash was inevitable once the conversation shifted from legacy to accountability. That discussion highlighted how talk shows often blur the line between conversation and confrontation for the sake of ratings. In the days that followed, Mel Brooks received an outpouring of support from fellow comedians who felt the same pressure he described. Many praised him for saying what others were afraid to say on live television. They argued that his walk-off wasn't disrespectful, but rather a refusal to have his life's work judged by ever-changing standards without context. Joy Behar, meanwhile, faced her own wave of reactions. Supporters applauded her for standing her ground and challenging a powerful figure in comedy. Critics accused her of provoking the situation unnecessarily. Despite the mixed response, Joy maintained that difficult conversations were necessary, especially on a platform designed to debate culture, politics, and social change openly. As the controversy grew, clips of Mel's past interviews resurfaced, showing moments where he had spoken about censorship, satire, and the importance of laughter during dark times. Fans argued that his history proved his intentions were never malicious. Instead, they saw a man frustrated by what he perceived as fear replacing freedom in creative spaces. The network behind The View released a brief statement acknowledging the unexpected nature of the confrontation. They emphasized respect for differing opinions and praised both Mel Brooks and Joy Behar for expressing their views passionately. While carefully worded, the statement did little to calm the ongoing debate, which had already taken on a life of its own online. Academic discussions soon followed, with cultural critics framing the incident as a reflection of society's struggle to balance progress with preservation. Was comedy meant to adapt endlessly, or should some forms remain untouched as historical artifacts? Mel's eruption gave that question a human face, turning abstract theory into emotional reality. For Mel Brooks, the walk-off became an unexpected final chapter in a career defined by fearless creativity. Though he continued to make public appearances, he was noticeably more selective, choosing platforms where long-form conversations allowed nuance instead of confrontation. The experience seemed to reinforce his belief that not every stage was meant for every discussion. Fans noticed a shift in how Mel spoke about comedy afterward. His tone softened, but his message remained firm. He emphasized that laughter had always been his way of fighting intolerance, not promoting it. To him, satire was a mirror held up to society, and smashing that mirror wouldn't make the flaws disappear. Joy Behar also reflected on the moment in later episodes, acknowledging that emotions ran high on both sides. She reiterated her respect for Mel's legacy while standing by her belief that cultural accountability mattered. Her comments suggested that while the clash was intense, it wasn't rooted in personal animosity but in deeply held convictions. Over time, the confrontation became shorthand for broader industry tension. Producers, writers, and performers quietly debated whether future interviews should be more carefully structured to avoid similar blow-ups. Some argued that raw moments like this were necessary, while others feared they discouraged meaningful dialogue. Audiences remained divided, but many agreed on one thing: the moment felt real. In an era of carefully curated appearances, Mel Brooks' eruption stood out as unscripted and emotional. That authenticity, whether applauded or criticized, was what kept the conversation alive long after the episode aired. Years later, fans would still reference The View clash as one of the most explosive interviews in daytime television history. It wasn't remembered for insults or theatrics alone, but for how it captured a turning point in entertainment culture. Two voices, two eras, and one unresolved question about the future of comedy collided in real time. In the end, Mel Brooks' eruption on The View wasn't just about one argument with Joy Behar. It symbolized the larger struggle over who gets to define humor, art, and progress. Whether seen as defiance or discomfort, his walk-off ensured that the conversation would continue long after the applause faded and the cameras cut away. As the debate continued to resurface, industry insiders began pointing out how rare it was to see someone of Mel Brooks' stature visibly lose patience on live television. For decades, he had been celebrated as a master of timing and restraint, even when tackling controversial subjects. That was why this moment struck such a nerve. It revealed the emotional weight behind a lifetime of creative battles that audiences rarely get to see. Comedy historians weighed in, noting that Brooks came from an era where satire was often the sharpest weapon against injustice. They argued that his frustration stemmed from fear that humor was being stripped of its edge. To them, his eruption wasn't about ego, but about preserving a tradition where laughter served as resistance, not compliance. Younger viewers, however, continued to interpret the clash differently. Many felt the exchange showed how difficult it was for older cultural icons to accept new social norms. They believed Joy Behar was simply voicing concerns shared by a generation raised on accountability and inclusion. This split reinforced how the confrontation mirrored broader societal tensions far beyond daytime television. Online discussions grew increasingly nuanced as days passed. What began as viral outrage slowly evolved into thoughtful debate threads analyzing intent versus impact. People began asking whether it was possible to honor legendary comedy while still acknowledging that audiences had changed. Mel Brooks' walk-off became a catalyst for conversations that had been simmering for years. Privately, sources close to Brooks suggested the incident weighed on him more than he initially admitted. While he stood by his words, he reportedly reflected on how quickly conversations could escalate in modern media spaces. Friends described him as thoughtful rather than bitter, still passionate about comedy's future even if he disagreed with its current direction. Joy Behar, too, reportedly took the backlash seriously. Known for her thick skin, she nonetheless acknowledged that hosting meant balancing challenge with empathy. Colleagues noted that the incident prompted internal discussions about guest dynamics and how easily debate could tip into confrontation when deeply personal beliefs were involved. Over time, the clash was referenced in comedy specials, late-night monologues, and even academic panels. It became shorthand for the moment when generational perspectives on humor collided in plain sight. The fact that it happened between two respected figures only amplified its significance. Television critics later described the episode as one of The View's most defining moments, not because of shock value alone, but because it stripped away the polished veneer of talk show discourse. Viewers weren't watching characters or talking points, so they were witnessing genuine frustration and conviction unfold live. As ratings data surfaced, it became clear the episode had drawn unusually high engagement. But unlike typical viral moments, the attention didn't fade quickly. Weeks later, the confrontation was still being referenced, debated, and reinterpreted, proving its impact went far beyond a single broadcast. In interviews months later, Mel Brooks emphasized that he never intended to disrespect Joy Behar personally. He framed the moment as a passionate defense of creative freedom rather than an attack. His tone was calmer, but his stance remained unchanged, reinforcing that the eruption came from principle, not impulse. Joy, for her part, continued to assert that dialogia, even uncomfortable dialogia, was necessary. She maintained that confronting legendary figures wasn't about diminishing their legacy, but about ensuring conversations stayed relevant. Her refusal to retreat added another layer of complexity to how the clash was remembered. Fans eventually began to view the incident less as a feud and more as a moment of truth. Two people, shaped by different eras, speaking honestly without filters. In a media landscape often criticized for being scripted, that rawness became part of its lasting appeal. Looking back, many agreed that neither Mel Brooks nor Joy Behar truly won the confrontation. Instead, the audience gained something more valuably, a rare glimpse into how cultural values evolve and collide. That discomfort, while intense, forced reflection rather than offering easy answers. The legacy of the clash endured because it represented a crossroads, one path rooted in fearless satire without restraint, the other grounded in awareness and responsibility. Mel Brooks' eruption on The View ensured that this crossroads couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Ultimately, the heated confrontation became more than a headline or viral clip. It transformed into a defining cultural moment, reminding viewers that comedy, like society itself, is constantly negotiating its boundaries. And in that negotiation, voices like Mel Brooks and Joy Behar, however conflicting, remain essential. In the months following the incident, media scholars began using the Mel Brooks and Joy Behar confrontation as a case study in public discourse. They analyzed how generational perspectives, cultural evolution, and media framing all played roles in escalating a conversation. The debate highlighted the fine line between challenge and confrontation, showing that even well-intentioned questions could ignite unexpected tension. Late-night hosts frequently referenced the incident, turning Brooks' passionate outburst into talking points about humor, freedom of speech, and the shifting expectations of celebrities. Clips from the episode became viral examples of what happens when old-school comedic ideals clash with modern sensitivity, sparking conversations that extended beyond the comedy world. For Brooks, the aftermath offered an opportunity to reflect publicly on the state of entertainment. In interviews, he shared stories of the pressures faced by comedians over decades, explaining that while he respected evolving norms, he felt humor should remain fearless. He emphasized that laughter could challenge authority and provoke thought in ways that caution often couldn't. Behar, meanwhile, spoke to journalists about her role in the confrontation. She expressed that while the exchange was intense, she valued open debate and believed it was necessary to question even legendary figures. Her perspective emphasized the responsibility of media personalities to balance respect with honest inquiry, a lesson amplified by the incident. Across social media platforms, viewers dissected every moment of the exchange. Hashtags related to the event trended for weeks, with opinions ranging from fervent support of Brooks' stand to praise for Behar's insistence on accountability. The clash became a viral phenomenon, symbolizing a broader cultural struggle between tradition and progression. Some comedians publicly commented, praising Brooks for defending the core of his craft. They argued that while accountability in comedy is important, the freedom to push boundaries is essential to the art form. Their support further reinforced the notion that Brooks' outburst was less about disrespect and more about advocating for creative liberty. Fans of The View debated the role of talk shows in facilitating or amplifying confrontations. Critics argued that the show's format, which encourages debate and strong opinions, inherently risks creating viral conflicts. Meanwhile, supporters claim that genuine disagreement on air is what keeps programming authentic and engaging. The incident also prompted broader discussions about civility in public discourse. Observers noted that passionate disagreement doesn't necessarily equate to personal animosity. Brooks' eruption, when examined carefully, was as much a defense of comedic tradition as it was an emotional response to perceived misunderstanding. Academics began using the incident in lectures on media ethics, exploring how live television can escalate tensions and influence public perception. Students analyzed the psychological and sociological aspects of celebrity confrontations, noting how the emotional intensity of Brooks' eruption resonated with audiences far beyond the episode itself. In retrospective interviews, Brooks admitted that leaving the stage was a mix of frustration and principle. He clarified that his intent was never to humiliate Behar, but to assert that comedy requires space to challenge norms without fear. This nuanced explanation helped soften some criticism while validating the raw emotion seen on camera. Behar later reflected that the confrontation reinforced her commitment to asking tough questions. While she regretted any personal offense, she stood by the idea that celebrity culture should be critically examined. Her stance highlighted the ongoing tension between respect for experience and the need for accountability in public conversations. The incident sparked debates among fans about the evolution of humor over decades. Many argued that Brooks' frustration reflected a generational divide. Older audiences favored bold, unapologetic comedy, while younger viewers valued inclusivity and sensitivity. This divide became a central talking point in discussions about the future of entertainment. Despite the controversy, Brooks' career continued to thrive. He remained a celebrated figure in Hollywood, receiving accolades for his contributions to film and comedy. The eruption, rather than diminishing his legacy, added a layer of complexity, showing that even revered figures have limits when provoked about cultural shifts. Similarly, Behar continued her career on The View, becoming more mindful of the impact of her questions. While her interviewing style remained assertive, she acknowledged the need to balance challenge with tact, ensuring discussions remained engaging without escalating unnecessarily. The incident became a learning experience for the entire cast. Over time, the confrontation was memorialized in pop culture commentary, described as a defining moment in daytime television. It was cited as an example of how humor, generational values, and lived debate can collide in unpredictable ways. Both Brooks and Behar were recognized for their authenticity, even amidst disagreement. The lasting lesson from the Mel Brooks eruption was that even in moments of conflict, public discourse can spark meaningful conversation. The clash was a reminder that passion, principle, and perspective often collide in ways that are uncomfortable but necessary, shaping the way audiences, comedians, and media figures think about humor and cultural responsibility.